How do you decide what to put on in the morning? What might seem like a simple decision has been formed for us by years of evolutionary programming, societal norms, and cultural values. We tell the world around us an awful lot of information just with what we wear, from the climate we live in, to our hobbies, to our religious beliefs. If you've ever wondered why you pick out the clothing that you do, then stay tuned as I break down why we wear clothes. Hey everyone, welcome to Megan Grace DIY, and today I'm going to talk you through one of my favorite topics, and that is the topic of why as humans do we wear clothing, or why do we choose the clothes that we do. This is one of the most important topics for any beginning fashion student, but I also think it's really worthwhile to anyone out there who wears clothes, which is pretty much all of us. In order to break this down, I'm going to refer in this video to something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you have never heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I'm going to put the pyramid up on the screen right now. And it's basically human motivations, and it's a pyramid that we need to work our way up in order to feel like a self-actualized human. Now, we fill these needs in a number of different ways, but we also fill these needs with the clothing that we put on our body. Fashion is a very deeply personal subject, and a lot of us will express our creativity through the clothing we choose to put on our body. But before we can get to the level where we're expressing ourselves creatively, we have to start at the bottom, and the bottom is our physiological need. This is otherwise known as protection. Now, when I talk about protection, I'm meaning the things that basically come at us. So things we can't control. We can't control the weather. So as early humans, we learned, okay, we need to protect the vital parts of our body in order to survive. We have evidence of, in hotter climates, wearing linen to help protect our skin from the sun, in colder climates, killing animals for their wool or for their fur pelts to keep us warm. So from the very start of man, we're talking like after the discovery of fire, we've been protecting ourselves through clothing. Now, we also have learned very early on that we need to protect ourselves from enemies. And we would use leather pelts because they're thicker to make sure that we weren't at risk of either being attacked by an animal or attacked by a different tribe. All the way up through the knights in medieval times, they figured out, oh, if I go out to fight with metal covering my body, I have a much better chance of surviving and making it back home than if I went out without that. So through time, we've evolved to put on things that protect us to make sure we're going to live longer. As we move up the hierarchy, we're going to move into an area known as safety. Now, you might think safety and protection, they kind of sound similar. They might be sort of the same thing, but I'm going to label safety as the things that we go out to do, the things that we search out. So safety would be when we dress ourselves to protect ourselves in terms of an occupation, or maybe we're doing a hobby or a sport and we need our clothing to help us perform better. So over time, we've developed things like Kevlar vests for police officers. We've developed flame retardant clothing for firefighters, so that way they can go and do their job and still come home safe at the end of the day. This is a really great example of evolution in human technology, because we wouldn't be able to do all these things if we hadn't learned and moved forward with the garments that we can put on our body. We also have really awesome technology in terms of sports clothing. So when you see people compete in the Olympics, especially like swimmers, their suits are designed to make them go faster in the water. Shoes for runners are designed to make their foot hit the ground in a different way to make them faster. I know I've mentioned in previous videos, I was a competitive figure skater for quite a long time. And those blades, the technology of the blade and the boot had developed over the course of my skating career and has continued to develop after I've left the skating community to help improve a skater's ability to jump higher or spin faster. So we have this really long history of developing clothing that's going to either A, protect us from an outside element, or B, help us perform better in a task that we're looking to do. Now that our need for protection and safety is satisfied, we've gotten up in the morning, we've looked outside, oh, it's cold today, I need to wear a jacket, or it's hot today, I need to wear a nice wide-brimmed hat to keep my face protected from the sun. Once that's satisfied, we can move up into the next category, which is love and belonging. Now, every single person has an internal need to belong to a group and to feel love from other people. We evolved as humans when we were in our caveman days that if you were alone, that probably meant you were going to die, because we knew that as a group, we could defend ourselves from enemies better, we found food easier, and that's just how we grew up, was we learned that as long as we're in a group, we are safe. there's no difference in how we apply our clothing. Now, I want you to think back, if you're around my age or a little older watching this video, think back to like when you're in middle school or high school and you kind of saw, certain fashion trends going on.
I saw Katie Heron wearing army pants and flip-flops, so I bought army pants and flip-flops.
I know I would see them and my parents couldn't always afford to give me, the latest trends or buy me new clothes all the time. And you really feel like you're going to die. Like you're like, oh my God, I don't have this. And it's really a stressful situation. And it's because our brain is built to feel that way. We are built to feel that if we're not in the group we want to be in, that we could possibly die. Now, we all know that if, you don't get the newest pair of jeans or the newest shirt, you're not going to die. You're going to be just fine. But our brain is built for us to feel that way. So we intrinsically pick clothing that's going to make us belong to a certain group. Now, the first group I want to talk about that we strive to belong to is our culture, or basically the society that we live in. So we grow up, in a country, in a certain group of religious people, and a lot of these communities have, or not a lot, but all of these communities have unspoken rules that come along with them. And a lot of these unspoken rules we'll talk to modesty, how covered up or not covered up do we need to be, ostentatiousness, how wild and crazy is your clothing versus how toned down it is. And a lot of these rules will have their beginnings in religion. If we were to look at women who wear a hijab, that's usually based in the Muslim faith. If we go to other countries, we see women wearing a burqa. And if you were to compare them to Americans, we go, oh wow, that's so different to us. Why are they all covered up? But that's simply their religion. That's what they were raised to believe, and that's how they were raised to dress. Same with if you were to look at people who live in Amish country or who practice, Mennonitism, it's considered more appropriate to be covered up. When you look at the United States, our version of modesty could probably be considered more on the immodest side. It's definitely a range. But there's not a 100% set of rules for what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. A really good example of this would be when Kayla Ebert, she in 2007 went to board a Southwest plane to go to Tucson, and she had on a white tank top, I believe a teal sweater, and a white miniskirt. And the flight attendants told her that she was inappropriately dressed to be on the plane and asked her to deboard. Now, most people, it was a really big uproar because most people would be like, oh, her outfit was fine. Now, I wasn't in the head of anyone that day, so I don't know what led to the decision of, oh, your outfit is not modest enough to be in this group at this point in time, but that was the decision. So we can run into conflicts when it comes to modesty and what's appropriate within a certain society. Now, again, if we want to compare to the other end, if we were to look at tribes in Africa, many of them just cover up their most sensitive bits, and that is that. And a lot of us are like, whoa, oh my gosh, they're all walking around topless, and that's crazy to us. But it's not. It's simply their culture. And if you were to say, if I was to walk out my door right now topless, I'm not going to, of course, but if I was to walk out the door right now topless, there actually is no law saying I can't do that, but I would certainly feel quite a bit of social pressure to put my top back on. We also use clothing quite a bit to assimilate ourselves to even smaller groups. So I know for me, I've been on a lot of sports teams, I've been in a lot of school districts, and anytime I'm in one of those groups, the first thing I do is I buy swag with the logo of the school or of the team that I'm on. It's like an addiction. I'm like, oh, I want a shirt, and I want a hoodie, and I want a backpack, and I want a hat, and I want all this stuff. And I think a lot of people do that. So we will show our affiliation with smaller groups based on what we wear. Think about a football game. How many people go there in the swag of the team that they are supporting? They are telling everyone around them, hey, I support this team. And this can be, to a positive end, and this can also be to a detriment. I've definitely seen throughout history a lot of examples where certain clothing items can identify groups in a really negative way. One of the biggest ones that comes to mind for me is the Holocaust. That during the Holocaust, people who identified with the Nazi party, they would wear the swastika on the arm. So you very clearly knew, okay, I sympathize with this party. We can even see this as early as the French Revolution. During the French Revolution, there were these little ribbons called cockades, and it was a white, red, and blue kind of rosette. And people would wear it to say, hey, I identify with the French Revolution. I no longer support the monarchy. I am on, at least what I think, on the right side of this situation. And people do that even to go back to that safety thing we were talking about before. They want to feel safety in the group that they've identified with. Another example of this that's happened recently, and I try to kind of keep my personal beliefs out of videos like this because it's pretty factual how we choose our clothing, but when we saw the insurrection on January 6th at the US Capitol, we saw a lot of people in that audience with clothing that said, I believe in QAnon, I associate with QAnon, and they identified themselves as being part of this group that believes in that theory. And, whether you see that as a negative or a positive, somebody is designing and selling that clothing, even though many of us would view that as a negative. And I'm sure I found things on Amazon, on Etsy, all over the place that whoever's developing that clothing, they're not necessarily doing it. They're not really thinking about the reasoning why they're selling that clothing. I'm sure they're just doing it because, hey, this is what's in trend and I'm going to sell it and it's going to fly off my shelves and make me money. Another way we use fashion to assimilate to different groups is by wearing uniforms or dress codes. Now, uniforms are very strict. It's usually a very specific, shirt, pants, dress. Like if you look at, I always love flight attendant uniforms. I think they really do make an effort to make them look really nice and fashionable, and they get Tommy Hilfiger to design things or like higher named designers. So I think that's a really great example of how uniforms can be used in the workplace to give a certain image of who on this plane can I trust, who am I looking to for direction. Because if a flight attendant walks on a plane in just jeans and a t-shirt, you wouldn't believe they were a flight attendant, right? We also see dress codes quite often in the workplace. So when I worked in K-12 school systems, I had to wear, business casual. So nice pants, a nice top, no jeans allowed, things like that. So you'll see businesses adopt a really specific way of dressing, and it's sort of social pressure to make sure you adhere to that dress code. Now, if I wanted to show up in jeans, would I have gotten in trouble? Probably not. Most of the time, no one would really say anything to you, but you still get this like kind of weird social pressure from other teachers. They might look at you funny. You might feel a little uncomfortable. So, we usually adhere to dress codes just because we don't want that social exclusion from the group of being the person who doesn't adhere to the dress code. But what I find really interesting as well is social groups will adopt a dress code without being told to do so. The best example of this is that Silicon Valley tech guru look. Now, we all know what we're talking about. It's like the Mark Zuckerberg, the Jack Dorseys. They look like they're still in college. It's just a t-shirt, jeans, sneakers. And they kind of almost, I feel like they do this to say, oh, I have so much money that I don't need to dress nice to impress you. Like, I don't know where exactly it stems from. I know Steve Jobs had come out and said, I dress in the same thing every day. So that way I have less decisions to make in the morning, which decision fatigue is 100% a thing. I totally get him for saying that. But they kind of developed this certain way of dressing. And you'll see when people move to California and try to get into Silicon Valley, they'll dress that way to help convince other people that they belong to that group. Another really great example of this is if you don't know the Elizabeth Holmes case, I would check it out, but I'm going to give you just a really brief overview. Elizabeth Holmes was a woman who had developed a tech company. She developed a product called Edison, which was supposed to be a machine that could do a variety of blood tests from just a single drop of blood. And this was like a big deal, so people didn't have to have as much blood drawn, and it was just a finger prick instead of the actual like intravenous method. And she got all these people to invest, and like she was named top businesswoman by all these magazines and whatnot. And lo and behold, her machine did not work. It was basically all fraud. But if you look at images of her from this time period, she definitely donned that like Silicon Valley tech guru look. She was all in black. She had kind of messier hair. There's actually like studies out there that she's lowered her voice on purpose to make herself appear more masculine. But she definitely presented herself in a certain way to sell the image that I belong to this group. You can trust me. I will be safe with your money. And it was a facade. If you look at her now, I was looking up recent pictures, and obviously she's going through trials and like all this crazy stuff because she was not found guilty of fraud, but she's on trial for fraud. How she's dressing now is completely different. Now she's got her hair curled and like nicely styled, and she's still in like the suits and the business wear, but it's all light colors. And I'm sure her lawyers are directing what she should wear, but it's definitely giving this message of like, I'm innocent and demure, and how could I have committed a crime? So it's very interesting, this very juxtaposed messages that she was giving us. One in the all black, I'm in this tech industry, like you can trust me. This is how everyone here dresses. I belong. To, oh, I'm innocent, I couldn't commit a crime, you can't think I possibly did this. And these are just some of the messages that we communicate with the clothing that we choose to put on in the morning. So besides our need to belong to a group, we all have an internal need to find a mate of some kind. Now, of course, there's exceptions to this rule, but evolution has programmed us this way, so that way we can perpetuate the species. So when we're getting ready in the morning and, we're styling our hair, doing our makeup, or getting dressed in a certain way, and we're like, I feel great, I look really pretty. These are giving off all these unconscious signals to the person that we're trying to attract, if you will. We have a really specific name for this in the fashion industry, and it's called adornment, otherwise known as decoration. So these are all of the ways that we can alter ourselves to make ourselves feel more beautiful and more attractive. So this can vary widely across different cultures. And one thing I would love for you to look up if you're interested in this is look up wedding traditions by country. Because, here in America, we have a pretty standard, or at least to me it's standard, because this is my culture, this is how I grew up. We think white dress, black suit, that's just kind of what we think of. And I remember, I want to say 5-6 years ago, I was in a hotel and there was an Indian wedding going on. And it was one of the most beautiful weddings I've ever seen, simply because the colors involved. And red is a more typical color for the bride in an Indian wedding, but everyone who goes to the wedding is expected to dress in these bright, vibrant colors. And it's so beautiful. And last year when I was doing research for a lecture, I looked up different wedding traditions for different countries. And you can see every culture has a different wedding tradition. White is by no means the worldwide standard. Same goes for makeup, hair, jewelry that we wear. So, I'm somebody who in the past year, I took the dive and I did, the vibrant hair color, and not everyone would consider that normal. I get some strange looks when I go out. I mostly get kids who are a little confused, what's on your head? Are you a doll? You don't know what's going on. But this is just my way that I choose to express myself. And, at the end of the day, we have to choose a way to express ourselves that makes us feel happy and satisfies us inside. When we're talking about hair, I want to give a quick shout out to my hairdresser. Her name is Annie the Painter, and she's in central New Jersey. So if you're ever looking for somebody who is really, really, really great with vivid color, I would really recommend looking out for her. She's absolutely fantastic. She does a great job. We also tell the people around us a lot of little secret messages about ourselves with the way we choose to adorn ourselves. So this can be seen most specifically in jewelry choices. A lot of us will wear, maybe a necklace that has a symbol, or maybe it has our child's birthstone, or I've seen really cute little paw print ones to say, I'm a dog mom. We will wear jewelry that really does express those little small intricacies about our personality. So for me, I have on right now, this is a chakra crystal. So it's the 7 chakras layered there. And, it kind of tells people, I guess I'm a little more hippy dippy and earthy crunchy because I believe in crystals and whatnot. But I'm telling people a message just based on that one simple piece of jewelry that I wear. While I was editing this video, I had one of my favorite YouTubers on in the background, Nick DeRamio, and I happened to notice he had a necklace that was almost exactly like mine. So I messaged him to ask what his stood for, and he's wearing his in honor of LGBTQIA+ Pride Month, as well as it being a gift from a subscriber. I thought this was such an awesome example of how two people can wear the same kind of adornment, but have it represent two very different positive things. I also have on me, I have my Fitbit, and that tells people the message that I care about my health in some way. So we can tell a lot about people if we just take a minute to look at the simple little details that they have on their body every day. So speaking of jewelry, we're now going to get up to the esteem level on the pyramid, and this can be most reflected in our need to show our status. Now, I feel like this can be one of the most stressful parts of why we wear clothing. Throughout time, from the very beginning of human civilization to now, we have been pushed as a human species to show our status through our clothing, through buying expensive items, through wearing precious stems, through getting, that bag that nobody else has. We have this need, this desire to show our status in society through the items that we can obtain. Our need to show status is one of the foremost reasons why the fashion industry is as big as it is today. Most of the items that we purchase from the fashion industry are wants. They're not really needs. We got our needs satisfied in those first few layers of Maslow's hierarchy, but once we've got those needs satisfied, we realize we want to self-actualize ourselves a little bit more, and we decide to be more creative, and we like to show off a little bit. One of the biggest examples we can see of this is if we go back to Elizabethan times. If you guys have ever seen those big puffy collars, those are called ruffs. And a ruff will basically show how much wealth you had. The bigger the ruff, the more the wealth. Queen Elizabeth was also known for having to put elaborate gemstones all over her dresses. Pearls, rubies, sapphires. The more gemstones, again, the higher you were in society. That's why we have things known as the crown jewels. We see special types of jewelry that stay within royalty, thus designating their special place in society. A crazy note from history is we don't have actual physical garments as old as when society began, but we do have jewelry. We actually have gold-plated items that higher people in society would wear in the Mayan and the Sumerian civilizations. So you can think back all the way to when we were first beginning to become people, what we are today. We wore things to designate who we were and what our rank was among the people around us. We don't always use our wealth to reflect our status. We often can dress in a certain way to show our status just within a society. And a really prime example of this would be within religious settings. Now think about it. If you go to church, if you're a person who has a certain religion that you adhere to, usually you know who the priest is, specifically by how they're dressed. Depending on the religion, the religious clergy can sometimes be extremely ornate, or it could be a much more withdrawn and simplified way of life. When we were talking about dress codes before, if there's a really strict dress code or uniform in a workplace, a lot of times if you are a higher rank in that workplace, you'll have a special designation in your dress code or uniform, so that way people know that either you're a leader among that group or you've reached some sort of higher rank. It does also seem to be a human need that if you happen to advance your status in society, you need to let everybody know. So that's kind of why we'll see a lot of YouTubers who maybe go viral or hit it big. All of a sudden they'll be dressed head to toe in Gucci and be rocking designer bags, versus before they maybe didn't care about that stuff as much. And then another place we might see status demonstrated is, in sports teams. An Olympic medal, that has a really, really high status associated with it. If you get up to a black belt in karate, I guarantee you probably want to wear that karate belt everywhere you go, even though it might not always be appropriate. I know when I was figure skating, when I would come back from a competition, if I did especially well, we would as a team agree to wear our medals to class on Monday. And I know it seemed a little silly. Other people probably had no idea what that medal signified, but to me, it showed a really significant status that I had worked very, very hard to achieve. We also use clothing often to designate a specific role within a society. One of the most common examples across many different societies is wedding rings or an engagement ring. Now, an engagement ring can represent a whole bunch of different things, but first and foremost, it tells people around that person that that person is no longer available to enter a romantic relationship. But we can also use engagement rings to signal things like our wealth, because a lot of times when someone gets engaged, the first thing someone says is, "Oh, let me see the ring." And a lot of people will judge, is it big enough? Is it, how much did they spend on the ring? And all these secret little things that get communicated just in that one simple piece of jewelry. Besides roles like wife or husband, we can also use clothing to designate gender and age. Now, in terms of gender, we have genderfied a lot of different clothing types throughout history, and if you go back in time, we tend to flip-flop things very often. But I could do a whole nother video just on the gender of clothing itself, so I'm gonna kind of move on to age at this point. We have designated certain clothing for certain age groups. And again, if we go back to when we were talking about those societal norms, anytime someone tries to dress outside of that age group or against what society thinks they should be dressing in, there tends to be a really specific reaction. So for example, for little girls, we expect them to be in, frilly clothing, nothing too tight, nothing too revealing. And a lot of times you'll hear, oh wait, she's not dressed appropriately for her age. One of the most famous examples from Hollywood is the actress Millie Bobby Brown, who is in the show Stranger Things. Now, I love that show, fantastic. And when she was in it, I believe she was like 13 when she was kind of a breakout star. And obviously she became really popular. She got herself a stylist and a publicist. And when she started hitting red carpets around 15, 16, a lot of people were really concerned with how aged her stylist was making her look. Her makeup was really heavy. She had a custom made dress that was very low cut, this deep V. And a lot of people said, she's really dressing outside of her age group. So many times when we pick something to wear, we consider the fact that we are trying to identify with a certain gender or a certain age group and dress accordingly. I'm pretty sure we don't have anything like this in place today, but in past times, we actually had things in place called sumptuary laws. Sumptuary laws were actual laws on the book, basically stating what type of garments or actual housewares were allowed to certain social classes. One example would be during Roman times, if you were in the ruling class or the governing class, you were allowed to have something on your toga called clavi bands, which were these purple bands that went down the front. If you were not in that class and you were caught wearing clavi bands, you would get in some pretty pretty big trouble. I don't exactly know what the penalty was, but I don't really want to find out. Also, the color purple was often put into just the ruling class. It was a very rare thing to find in its natural state. It was expensive. That's why we associate the color purple often with royalty. If you look at a lot of Disney movies, the royalty are often dressed in purple. And that's because there was a point in time where it was illegal if you weren't royalty to wear the color purple. And now that we've made our way almost entirely up the pyramid, we've got one last level, and that's self-actualization. So once we've satisfied all the steps below that, we can start to really refine and be creative with exactly how we present ourselves to the world. This is where we start to communicate subconscious messages onto those around us. And those are things that we might miss if we weren't really looking for them. I know for me, I really like to just dress comfortably. I do dress up on occasion, but my everyday dress code is basically a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. If you were to look at more public figures, they usually have a pretty solid style of dress and a message that they communicate to those around them. One really interesting fashion choice that I thought communicated a very strong message was when Melania Trump came out to speak at the RNC, and she wore an Alexander McQueen kind of army green buttoned up suit outfit, if you will. It was a skirt and it was a jacket. And as soon as it came out, I was like, whoa, that is communicating a very, very, very strong message of power and leadership and military. It was a very militaristic looking outfit. And to me, it was very reminiscent of, World War II, Russian era uniforms. We have to remember that she has a stylist who's getting paid quite a bit of money to put her in something to be on TV. And that person definitely should be very well aware of any type of messages that are being communicated by the clothing that she puts on. Now that we've made it to the top of the pyramid, hopefully you can see that we've got layer upon layer of decisions that we've made to decide exactly what we're going to put on. Clothing is more than something we just pull out of our closet every day. It serves a function, it serves a purpose, and it communicates lots of information about ourselves to the people that we run into on a daily basis. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and learned something new about yourself. What do you have on today that communicates a certain message about yourself? I'd love to hear about it in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you hit the subscribe button and the like button so that way YouTube will share it with more people. If there's other subjects you'd like to see me break down, please feel free to leave those in the comment section below as well. I certainly hope to see you soon, and as always, happy sewing.